All right, good evening. I'm going to call tonight's meeting to order. This is the Human Services Committee for Wednesday, September 5th, 2018. We do have a quorum. Our first item of business is the approval of the minutes from August 6th, 2018. Move approval.
Second.
All right, so moved and seconded. Seeing no lights for questions, all those in favor of accepting minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Next thing we have is citizen comment. Don't we usually? Okay, sorry, I had to clarify. So for this committee, we call the citizens to come speak when we speak about their item. So I'm not going to call them all together like we usually do in council. So bear with me for this. Our first item for discussion is HH1, Recreation Program for Adults and Seniors. We have a presentation by staff.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Director Hemingway, I'm Karen Hawk, the Assistant Director of Community Services. I'm here to give a brief presentation regarding senior programs in the community and offerings locations, specifically the Senior Silver Sneakers Program and transportation options to and from the Senior Center. So currently we offer different types of programs at the Levy, different types of senior programs at the Levy Center, Fleetwood Jourdain, Gibbs Morrison, and Noyes Cultural Arts Center through the Fleetwood Jourdain Theater. These programs range from fitness classes, art classes, theater, dance and balance classes, walking clubs, and all different types of clubs, including the Foster Club at Fleetwood. So we, as part of, at the Levy Center, we currently offer the Silver Sneakers Program, which is a fitness program, an overall comprehensive class offered through a lot of Medicare benefit health plans. So in this class, it provides access to fitness equipment, such as fitness centers, classes. They do yoga, balance classes, like strength and stretch classes, etc. And then it also offers like social networking. So the classes offered specifically at Levy because we have to contract with Silver Sneakers in approved locations. As part of those approved locations, they have to have a fitness facility attached to it. So a question came up regarding Chandler Newberger and why we don't offer it there. The reason is because they don't have a fitness facility, and you have to be an approved vendor or an approved location site, and it's currently they are not. Additionally, another thing about the Silver Sneakers class at Levy, so they currently have. We've reached pretty much maximum capacity in the gym for the Silver Sneakers Yoga. Additionally, the Silver Sneakers Classic. I'm sorry, I couldn't come up with the name. So in these classes, we have about 40 to 50 people. So the equipment as part of that, Silver Sneakers allots us, I believe, $200 a year. The Levy Senior Center Foundation provides $500 a year in funding for equipment, and then the city provides the rest of it. Due to the sheer number of programs, fitness programs that take place at Levy, which is everything from Tai Chi to yoga to cardio strength and stretch, core and more, balance classes, etc., there is a limited number of equipment and supplies that we have for these classes, especially due to storage needs. So the equipment is used, it's shared among all of these classes. So there are times where in the Silver Sneakers class, there's a class prior to it in another part of the building that we need to wait for that class to end just before these classes start and kind of start collecting equipment to bring it, because we just don't have the storage, the storage space for that equipment. The equipment for this class consists of chairs, stackable chairs with like 2 inches of padding on the seat for the class, balls, small squeeze balls, bands, and hand weights. Again, all of the classes use these, but they are inspected weekly by the instructors and our custodial staff, and they're replaced as needed. So if a band starts to fray, we replace it immediately. So for these programs, we do have a variety of transportation options to and from the Levy Center. We currently have the Levy Center bus, which has 6 routes a day. There's a pickup and drop off in both North and South Evanston in the morning. Additionally, there's pickup then to go grocery shopping at 11. So the bus is still out in town, and then at 12:30 there's another take home from the center, but also pick up and drop off in North and South Evanston. And then it returns to take all participants home for the last route of the day at 3:30. If they're part of our Evanston benefit card and have the transportation benefit, they still have the option of taking taxis with taxi coupons, or they have the ability to use Uber, Lyft, taxis, RTA, paratransit. There are a lot of different options to get to and from the center. So that's it. You have any questions?
Thank you. Alderman Fisk.
Yeah, hi, thanks, Karen. So the bus route that goes around, is that centered around the Silver Sneakers program, since it's so heavily used?
So a lot of our classes are very heavily used. I think we've maxed out a significant number of our fitness programs that happen throughout the day. So the route does get there prior to Silver Sneakers. The problem in this case is that the bus then doesn't leave till 3:30 because they've missed the 12:30 run because of the class.
Okay.
So there's just a longer lag time. They do have the ability to get to and from most classes. Anything that starts typically 10 o'clock or later, there are bus transportation options for that.
So are there specified bus stops, or will you stop anywhere for someone who calls and says they need a ride?
We'll stop anywhere within Evanston boundaries. It's basically a dial-a-ride. They contact 311 first thing in the morning and tell people they'd like to be picked up. We pick up right close to their house, whether it's the corner, depending on where they're located within the block.
Okay.
All right, seeing no more lights for questions, thank you so much for that presentation. I'm going to go ahead and call Ms. Ducree up for public comment because she does not have a topic next to her name. Is she here?
Hello, everyone. Madeline Ducree here. I just want to touch on a few things here. The first one would be the Compassion and Choices Evanston Action team had spoke at the last meeting, I think it was, about, Faye Clayton and Missy Flemings, I think, wanted to implement something here at the city that had to do with the medical aid in dying. And I talked to them later on afterwards. If I would have known something was there, I probably would have spoken on it. And I'm quite sure it was on the agenda, so it's my fault. I would like to say something late about this situation because my eldest son died of esophagus cancer, and he suffered for 2 years, almost 2 years. And I'm in favor of this legislation coming on. And the reason being is that I don't think anyone, and I used to be a religious person, but I'm thinking twice about it when it comes to the churches, okay? But that's my opinion. I don't think God, if I should mention this, and correct me if anyone is wrong, that I'm wrong with any clergy person here or there. I don't think God gave us choices to suffer or not to suffer. We put ourselves in, human beings put themselves into that type of predicament. I'm trying not to tell you what I want to tell you, but I have to. My son suffered really, really bad. He suffered so much until he put his hand against a plaster wall in my house, okay? And I felt very helpless that I could not help him. He did not go to the doctor before because he didn't have insurance, so he didn't want a bill hanging over him. Saying that, he did go into St. Francis, and St. Francis pretty much turned him away because he didn't have insurance. So somehow, somewhere, Evanston Hospital accepted and made room for him there. Now, my thing is, Medicaid, who picked up his bill later, I found out later that my son could have had weed, whatever way you want to call it, marijuana, whatever, medical, that could have helped him to swallow. He could not swallow. He could not eat. Okay? So in the process of that, I had to watch my son lose weight before my eyes. And silly me, he asked for some kind of medication. And I said, oh, no, you may overdose, Jeffrey. And I kicked myself in the butt for that, even till this day. I don't want your pity, okay? I don't want nobody's pity. But I think people should be given the choice to watch their people, their children, their father, their mother suffer and can't do a doggone thing about it because the doctors, it is out of the doctor's hand, okay? So I feel that that should be put on the, whatever it takes, put it out there for people to make that choice. Okay?
All right,
Make
Mr.
the
Creed,
choice.
I'm going to have you wrap up here, please.
Okay, I just have to say this also. Harley Clark, Robert Crown, the police department, everybody is talking about money crunch here. What are we going to do about Harley Clark? What are we going to do about Robert Crown? Okay?
All right, Mr. Green.
And one more thing. I do not believe we need to have, as much as I like the things that Chief Editon done, I think if Chief Editon is going to retire, he should retire and let someone take that position. We do not have the money. Not for the pensions, not for the paycheck.
Okay,
Thank you very
you.
much.
All right, so we're moving on to HH2, the police issues work plan update. Ms. Esther, you're not on the list, so I'm going to go to my next topic. You can come and sign in on this form here, and then we will call you later. Chief Eddington.
Good evening, Madam Chairman. I have some quick, brief remarks that I want to make. Deputy Chief Pickett will handle any specific questions that you have on the work plan, but I wanted to forecast for you the retirement of the work plan at your October meeting. We'll do a final summary of that. Most of the items have been completed. There will be some continuing updates, for instance, on the CIT training for officers. Also, we anticipate on or about that period of time in October, we will pivot to dispensing the information specific to the police department on a dashboard application we'll have on the city website that will provide summaries that are updated monthly that will be readily accessible to the citizens so they won't have to turn into this meeting. They can go right to that website and be updated. That's still under development, but we're pretty confident that it will be mostly completed by that time. Also, I want to forecast for you in the October meeting, we anticipate putting on a summary of the Evanston Police Department's use of force events during the prior 12 months. I think this will provide an insight into our use of force and put that in the context of use of force nationally, which I think will be important. With that, are there any questions I can answer on those specific issues?
All right, looks like we don't have any. Oh, Alderman Braithwaite.
Just a quick question, Chief, on an unrelated issue. to this, but it did jog my memory. So a couple of weeks ago, we had a business that was vandalized on the corner of Church and Dodge.
Yes.
And so I know part of the investigation meant, looking at the camera that was there. My question is, just with the limitations of the technology, is there newer technology out there that would give for better visualization for that corner intersection? And if so, just either at a later date, or if you could answer it now, what are we talking in terms of a cost?
I am uncertain of the cost. We're looking to upgrade the system. One of the issues that was discovered when we began to investigate this event was apparently the cameras are not sensitive enough once they go into motion detection mode to
Right.
discern an individual walking on the west side of the street, because there's not enough pixels. If you're dressed in darker clothing, it won't pick you up, it won't trip the cameras. So we're looking to see if the existing technology can be tweaked to address that issue, and then if it cannot be upgraded to that point, we'll forward a proposal for upgrading the entire system at that location. We have other camera issues throughout the city that we're working on with IT, and I hope to have a recommendation on the cost upgrades prior to the end of November.
Probably then. Okay, we'll follow up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. No more questions.
I appreciate the courtesy, Chairman. Thank you.
No problem. So do we have an update for the actual report?
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committee. James Pickett, I'm a Deputy Chief for the Field Operations. Actually, the only update continues to be the crisis intervention training. As of now, we're up to 67 officers trained, and between this month and November, we should get 6 more trained. So as the Chief mentioned, that we'll be coming to a close on this actual report, but there'll be some things ongoing, like the CIT training, but no other further update.
All right, I have one question. And
Yes, ma'am.
maybe this will be addressed when the chief, of what he just spoke about, but I was interested in actually looking at the use of force policy.
Oh, okay.
So if you can just email that to me, or if
Okay.
that's going to be part of what the chief talks about
Okay.
next month, that's fine.
Okay, I'll take care of that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so I'm now going to have Betty Esther come up to speak on HH2. Oh, HH2 and 3. So like other committees, we have a 3-minute speaking time here.
Okay. Good evening. Those 2 items goes into context with what the letter that the Citizen Network of Protection sent to you, and a copy of you on the letter we sent to City Manager Rockowitz, where we had asked for to have more meeting than 1 meeting tonight, and that's it, for the community to have input, a meeting that was not really publicized and stuff to the community, for input. We think that's wrong, and that's just like the updates and stuff that you have. You talk about the updates on the stuff on the website. There is, you go to the website and we say for the stop and frisk, how many have happened in 2008? We don't know that. All I can get is 2017, the first and second quarter. This is the third quarter of 2008. We are not getting that information. Why? I don't know. There's a lot of issues that need to be brought up. People talk about then that we're having less stop and frisk, or it's really working, and the intelligent program, which is more or less eavesdropping on people, which is kind of invading their privacy. That is an issue. We need to take this out to do community policing, which means you involve the community. You have not involved the community. You have ignored the community. Community have came and talked, and there was a group that a town hall meeting, and they talked about the guns and things, and we had a program about gun. But the only difference with that program was, you notice, that the ladies and things that was there talking, the people was white. So it's boiling down to a racial issue. You tell us to go out and look for things in the community, to find some other community that is doing a policy or have done this. We do that for you. We have done what you asked. We have followed your suggestion and tried to follow your process. But when it is African Americans pushing that, we get no response. We get no respect. Now we have another program that will be coming up and talking about tonight. So you have a meeting that really should not be happening. It should be out in the community. And I have asked and I urge you, because Alderman Breakaway did say, and we appreciate his supporting, that there should be other meetings. Speak up. Let us have our other meetings so that the number of African Americans that are here in this community, that you are saying to them, yes, we see you, we hear you, we respect you, so we are going to be trying our damnedest best to get your commitment, your voice is heard.
All right, thank you, Ms. Esther.
Do not do that tonight, then you're just saying you don't matter, people in the Fifth Ward and people of color. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we are going on to HH3, Station Adjustment Forms. I believe that Patrick Keenan Devlin is speaking.
Yes, ma'am. Good evening. My name is Patrick Keenan Devlin. I serve as the Executive Director of the James B. Moran Center for Youth Advocacy. I also proudly serve on the Alternative to Arrest Committee. I've been asked by our chairman, Peter Braithwaite, to just briefly speak on the station adjustment forms that are in your packet tonight and urge for acceptance of these station adjustment forms. So in the formation of the Alternative to Arrest Committee, which was established by Mayor Tisdall and later those vacancies filled by Mayor Haggerty, our charge was to look at ways that the city could adopt policies and procedures to reduce the number, particularly of young people, children, being arrested within our community. And one of the issues that arose during our discussions was community members were confused, and I believe there was also confusion within law enforcement as to policies, procedures regarding informal and formal station adjustments. And the committee, upon reviewing the original station adjustment forms, found them to be, yes, confusing, found them to be mired in legalese, and so the committee took to revise those forms and to make them simpler, foremost to ensure that particularly children and families that come in contact with law enforcement, where law enforcement uses one of these tools, an informal or formal station adjustment, that they recognize that the child, the juvenile, was in fact arrested, what their due process rights are following that arrest, what are the terms and conditions that are being asked of that child, of that family, in order to avoid court involvement, because a formal, informal station adjustment is really a diversionary tool that law enforcement has via our state statute. And so I think the product that you have in front of you tonight is a really thoughtful work product that included many voices at the table. I'm just the one standing up here representing it, but we have several members of the committee who are here tonight, including Karen Demarest from the Youth Job Center, Sean Jones, and I know I spoke specifically about Sergeant Garner, but I think he deserves further credit. Sergeant Gardner served as our representative from Evanston Police Department on the committee and was really vital in helping us think through the revisions to the forms. Carolyn Frazier, who's not with us tonight, a professor from Northwestern Law School, Sarah Sillins, Patrick Sullivan, Mario, our Deputy City Attorney, and Becky Biller were really integral, but then many of you, including you, Alderman Ravel, serving on the committee, you, Alderman Fleming, serving on the committee as well, providing edits. We're really appreciative of that. But it was a group effort, and I'm happy to take any questions. Oh, and I left out a really important part of the revisions to the form, which was really the brainchild of Karen Demarest from the Youth Job Center, which was to change the language on the form and to really change the policy with regards to some of the terms that children are held accountable to as part of this process. The original form really just called upon children to complete a certain number of community service hours. And Karen brought to the committee that we should be thinking about these station adjustment forms as an opportunity to catch children and young adults when they are teetering, and that we as a community should really be coming together at that point in a restorative manner and providing a whole host of services, not just mandates of community service, that we offer job counseling, that we offer homelessness prevention services, that we, yes, continue to provide community service hours, but that it's in the frame of being really restorative and rehabilitative. So that was another major change within the forms. I'm a lawyer, so I can never speak short, but I think I'm done. So any questions?
All right, it looks like no, Alderman Braithwaite?
So I was going to make a motion to first, I don't know if there's an action time.
Yeah, I think we were trying to figure that out. It's just accept and place on file.
Is that what we need to do?
So we need to make a motion.
So I'll move to.
That's correct.
To
Thank you.
accept the recommendations that was submitted by the committee.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor of accepting the revised form and placing it on file, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries.
Perfect. And so I guess my comment to Patrick and to the other committee members is just a huge thank you, Sergeant Garner. And also I want to acknowledge DC Pickett, who also attended some of those early morning meetings to get us to this point. So this is just a follow-up in a whole suite of things that the committee has taken on. So the auto expungement has already been addressed at a previous meeting, and now the forms, and then the next big task that I will give you and the rest of the group credit for taking on is taking a closer look at the offenses. We have a whole list of offenses that has been outlined by Chief Eddington that we hope to divert from Skokie to our administrative adjudication. With that being said, there's just so many details involved with taking a look at these offenses, and what I appreciate about the collective group is that not only are we looking at the offenses and the outcome of the kids, but looking down the road to see what the impact is, and there's so much work that needs to be done with our administrative adjudication and some other moving pieces of this process. So thank you, Patrick and Karen and Sean and Sergeant Garner, DC Pickett, and the other members of the committee for doing just laborious work that's needed. Obviously, we don't have the same crowd that was here that helped initiate this process, but nonetheless, it's very important work. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, Alderman.
And actually, I have one more question, which we might have covered in the committee, but can you tell us when the new form is going to be used? And
Implementation, yeah.
yeah, and then also kind of what training will happen with the staff that's using the form?
I don't run the Evanston Police Department, so I can't.
Yeah. Sergeant God, can I take like just a 10-second commercial before you speak? So one of the interesting things, and Patrick mentioned Carolyn Frazier, who's on staff with Northwestern. I'm critical of police when we need to be critical. I think it's just as important to praise our Evanston Police Department. And one of the things that Carolyn Frazier stated when looking through our records made a very clear distinction with our police department and just how well the records are kept. And so she made the comment. I just wanted to share it while you were standing there. So
That's
thank you.
much appreciated.
You're
Thank you.
welcome.
Jason Garner, I'm a sergeant with Evanston Police. I did consider this, that assuming things were going to get approved tonight, how we were going to relay this to the rest of the department. I think I'll have a memo on the chief's desk tomorrow by the end of the day, and then it'll just be a matter of initially training probably the Juvenile Bureau itself, because they're the officers that issue this form. And then we could put out a department-wide special bulletin, of course, with the chief's approval, and find some time and some in-service training too at our next date this fall. So I don't see any obstacles to relaying this to the rest of the department.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so no more questions for that. Our next is HH4, Chicago Police Gang Database. We have one speaker, Rachel Human.
Good evening. My name is Rachel Human, and I'd like to make a few comments about the gang database, and I have some materials for you afterwards, which are much more specific. The gang database is a matter of concern because it's very, very easy for someone to get on that database. They can get on by an officer looking at what they're wearing, the way their hat is on their heads, and we all know that everybody has picked up the way of wearing the hat backwards that used to be a gang emblem, and now everybody wears it that way. If someone is seen in a neighborhood, which is considered a gang neighborhood, he or she could easily be put onto the gang database. And I'm going to continue to use the term he because 97% of those who are put on the gang database are male. Depending on if they have given reliable information to the police about other gang members, and we're talking about the Chicago Gang Database now, which is the gang database, which is on other databases, and I'll speak to that in just a second. That person is liable to be entered into the police, the gang database. From my experiences in teaching in a school I won't mention, another way kids get onto this gang database is by alienating in some way or another a gang member. And it's very easy for them then to be placed on the list. They can be reported. A little guy who looked like a freshman, even in his senior year, asked me if he looked like a little kid. And I said, no, why? He said, well, because they've put me on the gang. Well, he actually didn't know. He was a threat. And that's another thing that's a concern about the gang database, is that it's very arbitrary and nobody knows if they're being put on it. You can have a gripe against me and I can put you on the gang database, and so it eliminates the whole idea of due process. If you don't know you're on it, you can't register to take your name off it. Just a few statistics. Let's see if I can add these. 97% of those who are on the database are people of color. 97%, as I mentioned, are male, and 68% have never been arrested for a violent offense, such as the use of an unlawful weapon. The gang database, as I mentioned, lacks transparency because people don't know that they're on it, so therefore they cannot take whatever measures are necessary to get themselves off it, and thereby they don't have due process. I'm going to read to you some of the gang database is not just one database. It is shared with the FBI, the Department of Justice, the Director of National Intelligence, the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of Defense, the Illinois State Police, the Cook County Sheriff's Office. So once you're on the gang database, you're on quite a few other databases.
Ms. Human, I'm going to have you wrap it up, please.
Okay, I'm finished.
Okay, thank you. We can take your materials up at the dais.
You want me to give them to you now?
Sure. Give to Nicole. So I see there's a little confusion with my peers. So I had a conversation with the chief about this because it was brought to my attention by a resident, and then as I kind of looked into, the gang database, as it's called, I was wondering how Evanston uses it. I don't know if people are familiar, but there had been recently a court case about someone who was labeled on this gang database, and that was used against him in prosecution, and then he was able to prove that he was actually not in a gang. And there's been lots of independent, I guess, community concern about it, being as there's people listed on there who are over 100 years old, and there's people who are, I would assume, clearly either not active or not ever in a gang on there. So anyway, I brought this up to ask the chief about it and wanted to at least get some memo or maybe conversation if others were concerned, how we in Evanston use it. And so as you can see in the memo, we do not put people into the database. We don't alter information, but we do have access to it. And as Ms. Human pointed out, and I've learned from my research, it's been found to have lots of errors. And so I wanted to bring this to our attention as we, in this committee, talk about police issues. And I'm not sure if TC Pickett can answer more questions about this, or if this is a kind of a longer question. But I guess my concern is if we are accessing this information, how is it then used if we are potentially stopping or arresting or looking to prosecute people, given that there have been some known errors on the database. But before you answer that, I'm going to go to Alderman Braithwaite, whose light's on.
And thank you, Alderman Fleming, just for raising the issue. And maybe it would be helpful, at least for me, just to make a clear distinction in terms of what the city of Chicago does and how Evanston utilizes this information, and then what the city of Evanston does in terms of kids that have been identified as gang members. I think that would help put this in context for me. Thank you, sir.
Okay, one of the things, and I'm going to go way back when I was a gang enforcement officer, which was 20 years ago, actually. One of the things we do, that's just one of the things that we look at. We look at several things. We don't necessarily use that as just one catch-all. But if we have any information that, because there are, as you mentioned, some errors. But then again, it will be, I think, irresponsible for us if we totally disregard, because they are active gang members, because one of the criteria that is used is self-admission. And there you'd be surprised, a lot of guys will have no qualms about admitting their affiliation with a particular gang. So, but that's just one thing that we look at. We don't use it as a catch-all. Any information we can gather, we just take a look at, but that doesn't necessarily say, okay, we're going to definitely use this, because, like I said, this is a Chicago database. As you know, we work the Howard Street border. There are things that go on, as a matter of fact, a lot of things that go on south of the border. So we do need some information, what's going on in the 24th District, because that a lot of times does spill over to our side. So like I said, that's just one criteria that we use. We don't use it as a catch-all, if I'm making myself clear.
How do we, what's the criteria for a city of Evanston? Do we have any type of, I have seen kids who have been identified targets. I'm just curious.
You know what, because one of the things that we used to use was some of the criteria that was mentioned earlier, and we do, like back when I was a gang enforcement officer, that had to, like she mentioned earlier, it's a fad now. Right. So that's one thing that we have to rule out. I mean, back 20 years ago, if you had your hat tilt a certain way, more than likely you was gang affiliated. And just like with wearing an earring in a certain ear, that we don't take that because a lot of people have their ears pierced now. But there are just certain things, especially with self-admission is the number one criteria that we use. Okay. Tattoos. If somebody has Gangster Disciple tattooed on their arm, chances are they will be. But that's, like I said, that's just one thing that we use if we're doing an investigation or we want to know who we're dealing with. So.
Okay, thank you. So that was what I wanted to clear up, as it was, as I said, brought to my attention by a citizen who had concerns.
And like mentioned in the memo, we do not have access to it. We don't add anybody to it, and we don't delete anybody from it. Perfect. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's the last of our speakers, so we will go on to HH5, the EPD summer wrap-up. There is a memo. I assume that one of our fine officers can answer questions if we have them. This was something else that I had requested. Just as we know, we have a lot of youth who are out during the summer. We have a lot of officers that change their schedule to work with the youth, and I wanted to make sure I stayed abreast as to what those interactions are looking like. And maybe a further conversation later as we go into next year, but where we need to deploy, if our deployment measures are still efficient, if we need to deploy officers in other places, if we need to be thinking as a council about more activities. I know Alderman Simmons did a great job of getting a list of activities together for people. So I always want to be mindful of what our interactions of our youth are with our police and how we as a council can make sure that they're appropriate. Does anyone have any questions regarding the memo?
No, I think it was useful information, and it's worth noting that we didn't have any murders that impacted our residents. As well, I think this is the second year that we utilize the services of our youth outreach team in conjunction with our police department to help make sure that it was a safe summer. So,
Yes. So thank you for providing the memo. I do have one statement that I was asked to read by a citizen who could not make the meeting, and I did tell her I was going to read this for the record. Her statement says, her name is Catherine Flaherty. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. She actually lives in my ward. I'm a 66-year-old disabled woman, largely but not totally housebound. I'm a longtime Evanston resident and retired civil rights attorney. City venues are frequently inaccessible to me due to poor indoor air quality. I've reported one aspect of this problem, nauseous cleaning supply odor at the Levy Center. Nothing has come of those reports, probably because cleaning disinfectants are purchased in bulk by the city for all its venues. At least that has been the impression I got from the Levy Center folks and from running into the same fumes in the basement of the Civic Center. Converting to effective, less toxic cleaning products should be a no-brainer for our progressive city, and yet old habits die hard. I'd like to suggest Human Services Committee take responsibility for removing these completely unnecessary access barriers, perhaps working with the Environmental Board and Age-Friendly Evanston Task Force. This is the city's opportunity to become voluntarily compliant with ADA. I'm sharing these comments with the city manager in case my request for accommodation would be better addressed to the Corporation Council or some other city department. My illness and disabilities are profoundly isolating. The Levy Center in particular should be a meaningful resource for me, but the bathroom and floor cleaning products lock me out of this space. If it's more cost efficient for the city to start with a smaller trial of product replacement, the Levy should be a great place to start. Even seniors without respiratory and immune disabilities are more vulnerable to physical harm from these noxious cleaners. So that is for the record, and for the record, will say that I've already spoken with Mr. Hemingway, and this resident did contact me last year about this. Part of what we are going to, we did, obviously discussing this, Lawrence and our facility staff. One thing we do have to be mindful of is if we run public facilities, and disinfecting and cleanliness is very important. So we have to make sure that the balance of the cleaner's strength in terms of actually cleaning and disinfecting spaces also measures with, any kind of fumes and things we can do to make sure that our spaces are welcoming, particularly to those who have disabilities. Do you want to make a comment? No. Okay. So we are working on this issue. We take it very seriously. All right. So any more comments from the committee up here? Yes, Alderman Brisk.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to report on our ward meeting from last night. One of our agenda items was the Duluth Civility Project, which I've mentioned to council before. We had a panel of Father Robert Oldershaw and Joey Roger, both of whom are police chaplains, Pat Effiam and Betty Hayford from the League of Women Voters, and myself. And it was extremely well received by the residents who attended. I asked them if they would be interested in both serving on a committee or bringing this back to Human Services for discussion, and possibly moving forward and taking a closer look at the Duluth Civility Project. And they were very appreciative of that and encouraging. So I'd like to put that on the agenda, just a presentation of what that project is at the next Human Services Committee, with your permission.
Duluth Civility?
It's called Duluth
Project.
Civility Project. If you Google Duluth Civility Project online, they have a short video that explains it. What's interesting about it is that this was a project that was started in Duluth over 10 years ago as a result of the difficulties encountered by that community over a civic issue. In that case, it was it's an industrial city. They were losing jobs. Tensions were running high. And the question that they were having a disagreement on in the community was over health insurance for public employees. And it was almost impossible for them to come to an agreement or even have public discussions about the issue because it was so highly charged. But it points to the fact that a lot of communities now have picked that up as a model. So if you Google it across the country, you'll find various cities that are using it. It has guidelines to encourage better communication that are very simple and straightforward. But I think what's impressive about it is that it's been going on now for 10 years, and the community has really rallied around it, and it seems to be helping. So I wish that our meeting was televised from last night, because I was really impressed with what everybody on the panel had to say, and how appreciative, again, the residents who were in attendance were. So I'd like to take a little bit farther and let you guys know a little bit more about it and see
All
if
right.
that's something we want to do on a wider basis.
So just make sure we get whatever materials to Nicola to be included in the packet if you have materials.
Right, and I think Wally has those. Actually, it was Wally who suggested that to me, and then I did a little bit more research on it. Yeah, so I'd be
Okay.
happy to do
All right.
that.
Great. Alderman Ravel?
So going back to our discussion at our meeting last month with the folks from Compassionate Choices, there were a number of questions that various members of the committee raised, and so they've put together a packet of a lot of information to address those questions, and I'm just going to pass this down and ask everybody to take one of the folders.
Okay, great. All right, seeing no further lights, I'm going to encourage everyone who's here to go upstairs to the Parasol Room if they'd like to participate in the community meeting about the next police chief. Other than that, I'm going to move that we adjourn this meeting.
Second.
Second. All right, all in favor, please say aye. All right, thank you. Meeting adjourned.